So at Quartz Real Estate, our vision is redevelopment defined by and for community that is as vibrant as it is, or as familiar as it is vibrant.
Okay, I think that's great. All right, and then site planner, can you tell me what the changes are? Oh, I see your parks have moved around.
Yeah. So we've been moving our parks in order to try and create that plaza, as well as make sure that our retail has access to outdoor seating, so that in a COVID world, our patrons can enjoy the retail safely. And so that's why you see that 5,000 square feet of park on block 1. And then we've also tried to create large parking lots that we can use in a COVID world as a resource for the city to like run testing centers and drive through. They could run drive through food distribution, things like that, where you want a bit more room. And so that was also a consideration. So those have been the large changes with our parks.
Can you just let me know also why there's, okay, so tell me what the justification was for the retail being next to, or right at Madison and 9th. So, I'm just trying to get a sense of your thinking on what's happening on that corner.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that is thinking ahead to a world without COVID, because obviously, Elmwood will still be around, and we intend for that retail to serve public transit riders as well as office workers who are located in the mid-rise and across Madison.
Great. And then just one last question for you, I think, is what do you imagine on the 2 different kinds of parks, and how are you also imagining other parts of the site plan as part of your public realm as well? Other than the parking lots, which you explained really well.
I think we were talking about trying to work with the shelter, which has like a soup kitchen in the basement. We're trying to work to include that as a resource for our community, as well as some of the YMCA. They have a long history of providing community services, so we're keeping that in mind and hoping to encourage use of those. So if the soup kitchen is right next to the YMCA, then hopefully people can have access to those pretty readily. And then beyond that, we talked about zoning off some of the parking spaces in the low rise for homeless tents or other temporary, shelter spaces for people, which I know is something that has been used in San Francisco and around the Bay Area where we are, where they painted like big 6-foot circles for people to set up camps and parking lots. And I think having that in the parking structure also gives them some shelter from the weather.
Wow, that's a really interesting idea. I really like it. Okay, and then with the city vision, so this one's probably going to the neighborhood liaison. So what, so if it's by and for the people, what are some of the things that are or who are we thinking about, and how have you adapted sort of to this challenge from the last one? So this is more like an open question. What's going on, neighborhood liaison?
So we have included the bigger park for people to gather and spread out. And then in New York Dry Goods, we added a computer digital center, which during this time they can distribute computers and Wi-Fi. And the library can also distribute books to students and people who need to work from home, who don't have access to computers at home. We also increased affordable housing to 20% to account for the more people who are gonna be out of jobs or making less. We got rid of the skate park because we thought having more housing would have more, would make there be more affordable units for people. But skate ramps can be placed in parks as like pop-up ramps. We also decided that during the days we would like close 9th in the middle of the day, I believe. So it's very pedestrian friendly.
Okay, that's really good. Who are your highest risk groups?
Our highest risk groups are probably the old urbanists because they are senior citizens, and Jobs and Justice, who speaks for the lower income members of the community.
Okay, that's really great.
And the church, who speaks for the homeless.
Say that one more time. I just
And
didn't
the
catch it.
church, which they don't like, they support the homeless, which in this time is important to continue to do that.
What have you suggested to the city liaison and checked with the financial analyst on for how to address the necessary community benefits that you think are important?
Well, I've spoken to the city liaison and financial analysts on adding the computer digital center and increasing affordable housing, and adding a senior center that will, during COVID, will work as a food distributor, but after will be for the senior citizens. We've
Okay,
also
great.
added a senior assistance, which is a nonprofit, to our target tenant list, which during this time can like do errands for the seniors, like get groceries and other things that seniors would not want to do to risk their health.
Type in something as a financial
Very thoughtful.
analyst.
Yes, financial analyst, please tell us.
I also advocated for removing the skate park in order to make more city revenue to allow for more subsidized community uses in New York dry goods, along with increasing the amount of housing, because that significantly improved the city revenue.
Great. Were there any other, what were some of the other moves that you made to, actually, we know that there's less tax burden. So how did you leverage that a little bit?
We leveraged that to be able to increase the community facilities in New York dry goods. We kept the extension classrooms because those are non-subsidized, but they still help the community. But we additionally were able to add more community facilities than we were before, and increase the affordable housing to slightly over 20% to 21.5%, which was significantly higher than what we had before. And most of this was just due to the lower requirements for city revenue, because those are very expensive to the city.
And how are you as an attractive, what's your profit and rate of return? Is that still okay?
Yeah, our rate of return right now is 13.5%, and we're more limited, at least in increasing affordable housing and community facilities and parks by city revenue, because we still have a 1% above the required profit.
Okay. Do you think for those judges, or for the city council members who are going to maybe look at another team that is more favorable in terms of just the percentage rate of return, what is your response to them? Yeah.
I think our development, while it doesn't make quite as much, the return is not quite as high. It is really designed to make sure that it is a place where people will actually come, and there will be demand for the housing. And because there's increase in affordable housing, which means that having people in development make sure that there's people to spend money at the stores, so those will all get filled. And I think that because we're catering so much to the community, we're making sure that the development really gets used and filled quickly, and it reduces the risk of course, it's still a high-risk project, but it reduces the risk somewhat, and it makes sure that there is actually people in here that we're able to, yeah, I think that's what I would say.
Okay, great. So for the marketing director, I'm sure that, okay, so what are some of the changes that you have seen in the market, and how are you responding?
Well, I know that people aren't going to work as much, which kind of puts our large office district at risk. because people aren't going to want to go into a small space where it's easy to get sick, and they're also being encouraged to stay home. And part of what we've done with that is by grouping the labs and the healthcare offices in one area. So those are being used even during the pandemic. And then the ones that aren't being used are kind of pushed off to the side, where it won't just be an empty building. And so you're still able to see the beautiful working offices without also having the blighting influence of possibly empty buildings or empty offices. And we've also put all of the retail in an area where we're planning on closing off the street so people can walk there easily. And we're putting in takeout options so people can get in and then get out and go to the parks. So it really is about centering everything around the parks where people are going to have room to both eat food from our local restaurants and to see each other and see the options. So trying to like create the demand even if there isn't necessarily demand right away.
Where, just this is one logistic thing, where is the street closed?
We are going to close 9th Street during the day, and because people are spending more time at home, that might also mean people getting out of their houses more than they normally would. And so we're hoping that that will continue even after the pandemic is over, because this plan is going to exist beyond the pandemic, which is only going to be another year or so. And the plan is going to be here for long after. So knowing that like eventually this will end and it still needs to be working after that.
Okay, site planner, did you have further thoughts on the street closure, and did you consider any other places for street closure? And could you also elaborate on the timing of that street closure?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we developed this plan obviously without COVID in mind. And one of the things that we were very intentional in doing is making sure that there were no high volume traffic outlets on 9th Avenue. And so that naturally has a calming effect on traffic. And so closing 9th Avenue is really advantageous because we're not disrupting traffic so greatly. And it's also one of our larger streets, which means that people have place to spread out as they use it for recreation. So that was one of our considerations, is definitely the size of 9th Avenue makes it advantageous. And then for the time of day during COVID, obviously there are a lot fewer office workers, and so we don't have those same intense rush hours. So we're trying to target when we thought people would be able to use the streets the most. And so we figured during the day, people would be able to get out during the lunch break, during the work week, or maybe spend an afternoon during the weekends. But we also were conscious that having it during the day means that we'd probably have a little bit less foot traffic, which means a little bit less risk. So we're thinking if we opened it like right at the evening and our whole city went outside to the same street, that might be a little bit dangerous. But if we have sort of longer hours that are maybe lower traffic, then that provides a safer alternative for everyone to get outside when they can.
Great. And then what about some of the access issues that might be needed during the closure? What are some of the plans that you have for flexibility?
For transportation, or?
Just for access, like if cars need to get into any of the homes or to any of the surface parking lots.
Right, absolutely. So we have that surface parking we have down on Madison, or like right near Madison. And so we're actually thinking we wouldn't need to close all of 9th Avenue, but if we could close it from basically the Phoenix Hotel up to the top of the park. So in between like that line, if you think on 9th Avenue and up at the like edge of the park by Adams, there isn't really a need for traffic in between like those areas, which means that we shouldn't have too many issues with people accessing housing and so forth. And then the other thing is if people are staying home in their houses, then there really is much less vehicle traffic of people leaving their houses. So it shouldn't present too much of an issue.
Yeah, I really like that you're elaborating on more exactly where, and that, the flexibility of how to deal with the traffic is addressed as well. So Okay, that seems to make sense too. Okay, so city liaison, I'm getting to you last, but the city council has a lot to weigh right now. There's like several crises at hand, and so you're putting some good solutions out there for them. And I just want to know sort of what you're going to highlight to them, and see if what do you want to tell them as far as, I think typically we have a marketing director that is really selling this, but the cities are really trying to figure out what they need to do. So what are you going to tell them?
Well, first of all, I just want to point out that some of the stuff that I was thinking of pointing out was said at the end of what Sydney was saying when she talked about communicating with the city.
Sure.
And I think that something that's important to highlight is, well, first of all, that we really kept in mind all sectors of our population by, first of all, including the homeless shelter and taking advantage of Grace Memorial Church's offer to pay for construction costs is something that's useful to the city, because then it saves the city from having to organize its own construction project during this time or during any time. And also, it just generally helps support a vulnerable sector of the population that is put in pretty high risk due to the virus. And also, I think that something that is important to highlight is our 21% of affordable housing, which I think Sydney mentioned during her discussion, but that adheres to the goal that the RFP presented of providing housing for, quote, moderately low-income families, senior citizens, and residents who provide certain services for the community. And on top of that, in order to adhere to the goal of mixed income development, we also created 370 entry-level jobs and 990 skilled or office jobs. I should say office jobs. Okay. And on top of that, I think it's important during my presentation to highlight that we recognize that along with the financial diversity and support that we're providing, it's equally important to create a good social support system during this crisis and beyond. So for this reason, we created community facilities that in York Dry Goods that during COVID we would use in order to distribute food and masks and provide services for the community. And we also have a senior center that I think, again, Sydney mentioned this during her discussion, so we probably need to work out who's saying what on this. The senior center that in the short term would be used as possibly a hotline, or people would work to give food to the elderly and provide them services. But when the pandemic is over, we could return it to its normal functioning as a senior center. So highlighting that. And then also talking about the open spaces and how we've taken advantage of the subsidies of the parks. And sorry, I don't know if I should be presenting this to you or saying what I should be talking about, but those are generally the things that I'd like to highlight.
Yeah, you've got a lot of great points. I think actually if you were able to boil it down to sort of the takeaways, like how your team is presenting city solutions better than all the rest. I mean, you have really great things that you're going to present. So that's just a word of advice. But I actually also want to just get marketing director's attention and yours too. So both of you represent two different kinds of ways that the community can help. There's the private way and the public way. And with the city liaison, you really know what the public city part can do. So you've just highlighted quite a few of those things there. Now for marketing and the marketing director, and thinking about what the private side can do, because even though there's a lot of hurting with the businesses and stuff like that, there's possibly places where private development money can be used. And as Quartz development team, what are some of the things that there would be a partnership on that you think are really important for short and long term that you think will stand out against all the other teams?
For the private, like retail and offices?
it can be, you can elaborate even more. So it might be like that there are certain kinds of programs you've worked out with a site planner for street closure, for instance, but maybe there's others that you
I
have.
also want to talk about, we're going to have all our classrooms in the York Dry Goods building. Some of them are devoted to creating masks with private companies or even just with public facilities that are willing to make them and then distribute them to our citizens to increase the number of people who are willing to wear masks throughout the day as a way to reduce the number of infections. That's one partnership that we have between possibly a private firm and then our public amenities with our city. I think also with our parks, our neighborhood liaison might have mentioned this, but having galleries for artists and different like farmers markets, so that kind of combines like the private businesses that are producing the goods and then showing them through a city amenity or through a community event. So that creates the market that isn't really seen right now during COVID, when no one is leaving their homes or no one is going shopping just for fun. So that gives people back that market to sell their goods that they might be losing and might be putting small businesses out of a place where they can recover.
That's a really great answer.
Don't forget to mention sell your nonprofits, Eva.
Right.
Yeah, I forgot to mention some of those.
Sure.
Can I say something about that really fast?
Yeah, please do.
And I'm also not really sure if it's my place to talk about the tenants, but I was thinking of mentioning we have some tenants that are nonprofits that would help with our homeless shelter and would provide services at the shelter. And then we also have nonprofits that have to do with senior assistance during this time. And on top of that, I think it is important. I don't know who's supposed to mention this, but the labs that we've put in for research and stuff like that, I think that we should find a way to put that in a presentation.
Okay, great. I'm glad this is spurring ideas for how to.
Jane, what do you think? Do you think the marketing director should talk about that?
Well, no, I think private and public, as long as they separate them, because they have, I mean, there's partnerships in both. So it's kind of thinking about how you're funding, you know, which part is funding? Is the city funding stuff, or is it your development that's creating the amenity for everyone? So I think being more clear on that will really, I think that will be another level of understanding that you can demonstrate. And it seems like you're, you know, I have to just say you guys are really an amazing team, because you have a firm grasp on everything and you sound exactly like the people that I talk to at work all the time. So you're hitting a lot of the right messages. So now it's like to elevate the game. It's really to demonstrate that understanding of public-private partnership and, you know, who's in charge of which. And so, you know, how you're a private company offering all these things for the city, and we think that the city could benefit so much. So I think that's where you'll really, it'll really strengthen it. All right, are there any other questions or any other things that you
thing that I didn't hear at all that I heard you discussing before, and it was the testing center. Did you tell her about that?
Oh,
I think neighborhood liaison talked a little bit, but yeah.
Yeah, I think we also talked about the parking lot, having the having drive-through testing in the parking lot, or walk through or bike through, or however people are transporting themselves.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's an interesting way to do it. And I think that's exactly, we have to use all our public space as much as possible and be flexible. So that's a really good idea. Let's see.
The other thing that I have to ask you, Jane, is when they are proposing the street closure, that's a city thing. So that in essence, you really are suggesting it or asking, you know, she works with cities, she can tell you, and she probably suggests them to these things, how to approach that.
I think, I don't know, I think it'd probably be good to frame it by just saying that we've centered our parks and our retail around 9th Avenue, so that, if the city is open to the idea of closing it, then it will be a very productive community resource or space.
Actually, that is how you speak to the council. You say that you're proposing this and it's an action item that they could take, and it would really benefit. So these are all definitely proposals in their partnership with the city. And I think the street closure thing is it's happening in Berkeley right now, for example, but and there's so many ways to do it, but it is an incredible demonstration of how public and private work together as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah. This is really great. I think that there is a lot happening here. I think there is a bit about the retail that it draws my eye to that corner, and I think that I think at first I was like a little afraid about how far away the one is to YARP, but actually that's just short term, right? So thinking long term, that was a very good explanation. And I think rethinking what's going on in York Dry Goods with all the new different community benefits has also been pretty thorough. So I'm hoping you guys really hit the high points, especially since you're loading this up with flexibility and goodies. So I know that you have a lot in there, so try to keep theming things and boiling it down so that you can say it real quick, because that time is going to go so fast, just like this facilitation just did. And so, yeah.
Pay attention to that word that she just used, flexibility.
Yeah. But this is a very sophisticated project, and you've really described it in a great way. So keep that up. The more details you put in, the better. Like being site planner, being really specific about exactly where certain things are, especially that are not easily seen in the site plan. And I think with I think also the financial analysts, keep driving them with what you can do here. And I think I'm a little concerned that you might not be as high as others, but I think if you just highlight why and justify it, that you will still be in the running. So I think that's going to be really good. I am really excited and hopeful that you guys win. So
we are too.
Good job. This is amazing and pretty much the highest level I've ever seen. So I'm really, you deserve your place in this competition, and I hope that you just take it all.